tell us about this week's movie.
We watched the 2007 film There Will Be Blood, starring none other than Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview, about a very nice oil baron.
A very kind-hearted
Very
man.
kind-hearted man.
Okay, you told me some wild shit before this started, and I don't blame you. I know people who do this with podcasts because there's a lot of content to take in.
Yeah.
I have never heard of doing this with a movie, and the main reason I bring this up is because I'll put myself out there. I watched this and I thought it was a masterpiece.
Yeah.
So you told me you watched this film. I thought it was a bit at first. You said you watched this film at 1.5 speed.
Yep.
And how did that affect anything?
So
How did that go for you?
So here's the thing. Before anybody is like, I can't believe you watched this movie. I've watched it twice before this. I needed to just understand and get caught up for the podcast. And I was going to watch it last night, but our other main channel got banned from YouTube. So I was dealing with that. So I didn't get a chance to watch it. So today
and we should also just explain real quick for anyone who's worried. We did not get banned from YouTube for anything that we did.
Yeah.
Our channel got hacked. So we are not problematic. We are woke.
Yep. We're actually too woke for YouTube.
That's why they cut us.
No, we were compromised here at LoMo HQ, and we had a hacker compromise our YouTube channel.
We don't have the best security. We have a mouse trap sitting next to each computer.
That's about it. Got past it, and we're currently in the appeals process. So if you're wondering where our other YouTube channel went, that's what's happening. So it should be back soon. If not, I'll be making a second one, and we'll
have some kind of solution by the time you're listening to this.
Anywho, so in order to get caught up, I watched it at 1.5 times speed just for the sake of didn't have a lot of time today with streaming and editing and all of that stuff. So I figured, you know what, I'm gonna watch it at 1.5 times speed. Not much is gonna happen that I'm not gonna pick up on. I didn't think it changed much of the movie. I think I still got it. I think if you just started to watch this movie at 1.5 times speed, you wouldn't get kind of like the music and how tense it gets. But I didn't have any issues watching it.
I just can't. It just makes me think of that thing where you can tell the voices are a little sped up, and I'm just thinking about like, I am a false prophet. God is a superstition.
Yeah, it was just like,
I am a false prophet. God is a superstition.
Man, when he was beating up Eli in that like oil pit, it was so funny though because it was just like
really moving. Yeah.
But other than that, it was
drums
good.
On that kid's head. Yeah. Hats off. I think I would have a weird time with it, but I'm glad that it worked for you. I've already revealed kind of my thoughts about the movie, and we'll get into it, but just initial impressions and your history with this movie, Lo.
I saw it when it first came out in 2007. I watched this and No Country for Old Men in the same weekend.
Wow.
I think they're both excellent movies. The acting in There Will Be Blood is outstanding. I think Daniel Day-Lewis does an amazing job as Daniel Plainview, and I think the supporting cast hits it as well. I think Eli, the character or the actor that played Eli, was well done as far as like the religious like fanatic kind of. And then we talk about the cinematography, these shots, especially when the oil derrick's burning, and then at the end of that you see Daniel sitting there and he does that quick finger, and the cannons come up right beside where his fingers were, and they explode in there, and just the movement and the shots I think was outstanding. So definitely a masterclass of a film, and no wonder it's ranked up there as one of the best movies in that what's called that like Hall of Fame movie year of 2007.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a film about milkshakes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line about milkshakes, but we all know the oil is a metaphor for that sweet, sweet liquid gold that we all love and crave, those creamy treats. I don't have any milkshakes on hand, but I do have this is usually for after the movies, but I do have I forgot that it doesn't matter. I got a Pabst hard coffee. we can edit we can blur and beat my voice out if we need to. But I got a Pabst, a milk base. There goes Jim. He quit. He quit the pod. He's leaving. He unless he's going to get ice cream. I'm vamping. This is unprecedented. I really don't know what he just got up to do. Oh my god. Is that what I think it is? Okay, first I thought that you got up and quit the podcast. Then I thought maybe he has a milkshake somewhere for this. I am blown away. So we had parallel thinking. So I'm gonna cheers to you, bud, as if we're two oil barons celebrating our first season of a web TV series on YouTube. Tastes like Yahoo. Anyways, okay, so I've seen this movie. This is probably the second or third time I've seen this, but it has been maybe since this thing came out on DVD. Like it's been probably over 10 years since I've seen this. I do like Paul Thomas Anderson. I remember this being the kind of movie that when I watched it when it came out, I was only 12 or 13, and I remember it being this kind of movie where I watched the whole thing and was like, kind of get what's going on, but it's like so long that I don't really know if I'm following it.
This is
And
interesting. I think this is the first time we've actually run into this because now our age difference doesn't really matter at all.
Right.
But I think you being 12 and me being 16 was a huge difference in watching this movie. I think watching this from a 12-year-old's perspective and a 16-year-old perspective is very different. I think this was like crazy when I watched this as a 16-year-old.
I would absolutely agree, because my takeaway probably as a 12 or 13-year-old was, I know what I watched was good and I enjoyed it, but I also, my attention was not all there for something like this. And man, I loved watching it now. I should say that I really used to hate long movies, like growing up.
Yeah.
And I love them now.
Watch them at 1.5 times speed, bud.
If fit more long movies in.
Done like that.
Maybe we'll do the Godfather trilogy we keep threatening to do, but we'll do it at 1.5 times speed. The way that Coppola intended it to be. So what I really in particularly love about this, and what I forgot about it, is that there is not a lot of dialogue. It is a 2.5 hour film, but it is not. I think so. Like, if you think of a long period piece by another director, I think you think, oh, this movie takes place in the 1930s, so they're going to put a bunch of actors in a stuffy room that's made up to look like it's from the 1930s, and then they're going to give them 40 minutes of dialogue.
Yep.
And this like couldn't be further from that. It is stylized. The style matches the substance, so it is high on both of those levels. But there is no wasted dialogue. There's not a lot of dialogue. There's a lot. The music is great. Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead fills in the space with this kind of primal music.
Yeah, like weird, like heavy, like ambient
Beats
noise
and like beating and like sounds of machinery and stuff. And it's just long stretches of you watching these characters doing things and being at work and going about their life. And that surprised me. I like how much Paul I almost said Paul Thomas Anderson is the director of this film, but there's another director named Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yep.
Who has done the Resident Evil films as well as Alien versus Predator. And maybe we'll get to that someday. But yeah, no, I felt like this is one of those movies that honestly, it could be a half hour longer, and I don't think I would complain about spending more time with these characters or this story, because it is very tight. The things that I picked up more than anything, and I'm curious about like if you noticed, because I was thinking about themes a lot, and I was thinking about how the first time we meet Daniel in the opening scene is when he breaks his leg and he pulls him. It's kind of literally a pull yourself up by the bootstraps moment him dragging himself to this like gold and silver authentication office
Mhm.
with a broken leg just so that he can get that certificate to authenticate what he found. And there's definitely stuff in this movie about like competition and capitalism and greed. Daniel Day Lewis has a great line when he's talking to, spoiler, the man who claims to be his brother, where he says he was born with this competition inside of him.
Yep.
Um, but the bigger thing I picked up, visually at least, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it's just kind of what this movie is for me. At the beginning of the movie, when they first strike oil, and Daniel Plainview runs his hand down the oil thing, and his hand is like smeared with oil, and he holds it up in the air to like show people, and it's like this really primal moment, like it's almost like an animal with like blood on its hand, like
Yeah.
showing everybody.
So
And then at the end of the film, to match that, and I'll let you go after this because I'm not trying to take up too much time, but he kills Eli Sunday. He has this bad back and he's beating him to death with what is essentially a club. It's a bowling pin,
mhm.
but it literally is like this primal. To me, this movie is very much this like undertones of like primal human aggression and like his worldview being not only competition, but like I am here to literally kill my competition. Like I am an animal.
It's
I am
ruthless.
here to win and to make money, and that primal animal energy really comes through for me in this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at this from Daniel's perspective. I know there's a lot of takes on Daniel being like a sociopath and whatever and kind of just all in himself, but he has these breakdown moments when anyone that's he doesn't get close to many people, but he was close to his son, his quote adopted son. And then as soon as his son became deaf, and then he set fire because he was jealous of Henry, and then Daniel sends him off. He becomes attached to his not half brother, technically, Henry. And now that's the family dynamic that he's portraying. So everybody feels good and feels comfortable around him. And then that breaks down. And then every time we see these like dips of Daniel, it's because that like family element that he so craves has just went away.
Yeah,
And then the religious undertones of this film about how like people think that like I think that people think like, oh, because Eli's in there, there's this like religious undertone, but in actuality, the oil is
right, for
God,
sure.
and like Eli is, you know, like the devil trying to take everything away from Daniel and everything like that. One interesting point that I have to give credit to a YouTuber that I watched is there is a very specific scene in the cinematography when him and HW first arrived to California. They're walking through the desert, and I don't know if a lot of people pick up on this. The way they have Daniel's backpack laid out looks exactly like him carrying a cross. Like the burden of being an oil baron, that's his burden,
Oh,
his
that's
oil.
interesting.
It was interesting to me as far as like the shot,
Yeah,
how they decided to do it was cool.
that is interesting, and I didn't pick up on that. Um, yeah, the shots in this film are outstanding in terms of imagery. Um, First of all, this film looks like, and not in a bad way, I can't explain it. So I streamed this on Netflix, and I promise it's not my TV resolution, but it looks like it was shot on film of some kind. There's a little bit of grain to it. Um, to the point where when I was watching these opening scenes, I was like, this literally looks like something that maybe could have been filmed even in the 80s or something. Like if it's got this kind of timeless quality to it. Um, and what you mentioned before, I mean, there's a lot of really great imagery in this film, but that the centerpiece of the film for me is the oil derrick burning. I mean, that image is so well shot and no pun intended, just like burned into your brain. Them watching it, and what's even more interesting is what it's happening as his son has just suffered this accident and is deaf or going deaf, and so he's kind of running back and forth. He takes his son to this building off site and then runs back, and guys forget what he says. There's a guy there watching it with him, and he's like, "Why do you look so? What do you look so upset for?" Uh, this means that there's like shit ton more oil like underneath this or essentially or whatever. Like we just like struck more gold essentially. We have more work to do. And the fact that he is able to I mean, you do see him throughout the movie. It seems like he becomes more of a sociopath because he does. It does seem like his connection to his son is real
Yeah.
um, at the beginning of the film and throughout, and even to the point where he does think struggle with the decision to send his son away. But the fact that he's able to oscillate between those two moods of my son is going deaf like 100 feet away from me, but also like I just boosted my workload by ever how so much, and now we have all of this success.
He deeply, deeply cared for his son, and his son was his world. And when that part comes crashing down is kind of when we see this like descent into madness almost with Daniel.
Yeah.
As soon as his son
Well,
has
and
that.
that's using the son is part of it for sure. There is a part of him that is, from the get go, is that businessman of
Mhm.
I'm an oil man. This is my partner and son, HW. You can tell it is kind of this carnival act. But at the same time, when you are spending time with them together as a father and son, just the two of them, he is showing him tricks of the trade. It's not just he's not just being used.
Yeah.
He does have value there. He even knows he has his son do tasks like on some of the oil derricks and stuff, and the kids 9, 10. So he's taught his son enough that he is of value um, on site. That last sequence, and this is also interesting because I think there's a couple of other Paul Thomas Anderson movies that do this. It goes from, if I remember correctly, 1902 to 1911 to
37,
1932, 37.
32, 37, somewhere in there.
So you do see Daniel Plainview at the age of what I would presume to be mid-20s, and then again about 10 years later. And then there's this gap of when you finally see him and he is successful enough that he's got this mansion. He's got and this, this last scene in particular is like 20 minutes long. I mean, it is a full section of the movie. It would, in another film, it would be a full act. And it is, he is a drunk. He turns his son away. His son has forgiven him. See him turn his son away. You see how much of a drunk he's become, and it's only hinted at a little bit throughout the movie. There's a couple moments where he gets so drunk he's like sleeping on the floor somewhere, but it's always hidden because the work he's doing is so good. It's almost like a workaholic thing. The drinking is not really totally brought up until partway through the film because he's so successful. But you see him, I mean, collapsed in his bowling alley. His servant can't wake him up. Um, and yeah, Paul Dano plays Eli Sunday, the preacher who he has this rivalry with throughout the film, which really tense scenes.
Yeah.
I was like a little. At first I thought Paul Dano was overacting, and this is like why I like movies with this much depth and how long they are, because the first time you see him preaching, I thought like this is too much,
It's
and
a lot.
obviously what you realize watching it is that that's the point, is
Mhm.
that's his character. That's he is this very animated preacher, evangelist, Baptist kind of guy,
Yep.
and plays it well. There's this, he's humiliated by Daniel Day-Lewis. He's thrown in the mud, beat up on. Later in the film, he asks if he can bless the oil derrick, and Daniel Day-Lewis just ghosts him.
He says, yeah.
Actually, well, he says yes, and then he just doesn't
Doesn't.
do
Yeah.
it.
He does it himself, kind of, and was like, all right, let's go.
What I like, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Other movies, it's almost like this thing where you're seeing a good director when you can picture what 100 other movies would do, and they don't do it. They don't even show a reaction shot of Eli in that scene. They just show the group of people standing.
Yep.
There's like in other movies, there'd be a cut to his face, and he would be, like upset or looking around or something. They don't do that. They just kind of let the audience realize that this thing that was supposed to happen didn't happen.
Which is good. I
Um,
mean, that's excellent. Like when you talk about like there's a certain thing when you try to like guide your viewers too much into how they should be thinking, you kind of end up with like a kind of lackluster film. But the more you give your viewers time to analyze and come up with their own thoughts, those are the most successful films. Is when you sit
yeah,
back and have to think about it. Like given those like, oh, like Eli's mad, and then going like cutting back and forth because they could have easily been like Eli's reaction, and then back to Daniel like close up, but they didn't.
right. And I think too, I think it's the focus is on the human characters in this film, and that's why it's so successful. Because you could ask 10 people if they're interested in seeing a movie about oil barons, and probably at least half of them would be like, "That sounds boring. No."
Mm-hmm.
And again, those movies that you think of when you think period pieces, you think, "Oh, they're gonna have all of this boring dialogue about period specific stuff that I don't care about." And here, you don't really get any of that. You get real people experiencing what life was like for them back then, but they are going through emotions and trials that are relatable today,
Yep.
regardless of whether it's attached to oil or not. That's why this movie works so well, and that's why it's so simple and straightforward. That's why he doesn't need to guide his audience into anything, because you pay attention to this movie, you know what's happening. It's not hard to follow. Um, I mean, hell, there's two main characters in
Yeah.
this. It's very very simple. And I do like how complicated of a character Daniel Plainview is, because he is not. I'm not gonna say he's not a bad man. He clearly he murders someone at the end of the film, but you see shades of this person, and one of those that stood out to me is when they first moved to town. His son meets this girl, Mary,
Mm-hmm.
who mentions that her father beats her when she doesn't pray, and so they get to work, and they set up the oil derrick, and he's got the townspeople working on it, and there's a moment where Mary's running around, and Daniel Plainview catches her and just is talking to her and is like, "How are you?" and stuff, and she's like not into it. She's a kid. She's just kind of trying to run around and play. But he says, you know, "Daddy doesn't hit you anymore, does he?" She says no, and he's like, "And you'll tell me if he does, right? Because we know what's going to happen." And she's like, "Yes." And then he lets her go, and then it's revealed. You see that he's sitting right at the
Yeah,
table.
right with Abel, her dad.
He's humiliating him for what he's done, and so there are those are the things that make me think that this character in his 20s and 30s, despite still having this savage side and this competitive streak, there is a part of him that is a moral person.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think. I know this sounds silly, but I think of other movies I watch. Not stuff. I mean, like Coen Brothers are really good with characters too and stuff. But I just think of maybe your average film. I don't think movies put that much thought into the psychology of their characters, or,
Yeah.
or you know,
Yeah, they really
depth.
break
And I
down
really
these
appreciate
characters,
that.
which is great. Man, this was a great ride, man. This is definitely when we talk about There Will Be Blood and when we talk about No Country for Old Men, we're probably talking top 10 movies of
Ever maybe like
ever.
yeah, like of the 2000s. I mean, they're both. I'm excited to rewatch No Country for Old Men, because it's also been a few years at least, I'd say. And I remember absolutely loving it. And I think a lot of people probably would say that it's Coen Brothers' best. And a lot of people say this is Paul Thomas Anderson's best. So I do. I really think both of these films are culturally significant, and I'm excited to compare the
It's going to be
two.
fun because in this one where I think times like the score carried this movie along, we don't get that in No Country for Old Men. It is scoreless.
Yeah.
There is no
I would,
music.
if I remember correctly, and this is going to actually make it sound cheaper, but I don't mean this at all. I don't think it is, but I think that there's more action in No Country for Old Men. I think there's a little bit more
There's more
kind of
anxiety.
chasing.
There's more anxiety a little bit as far as like the characters.
There's more of a chase, I think, too,
Yeah.
of somebody being hunted kind of
Mhm.
thing. Um, so yeah, it's just I'm excited, man. I'll tell you. I think that this is this. I think that this is the second best movie we've watched this season. And in fact, if I go back, we're going to do a big finale next week. I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun because I think that I don't think we should rank all of the movies from season 1 and 2, but I think we should rank the ones from season 2, and then I think we should take all of the films we've covered so far and list both of our like top fives.
I
And I
think a
have a
lot of them are
very
going to come from this season.
strong feeling that well, I'll tell you, if we're doing top five, I don't know if Verhoeven's going to be in it at all. RoboCop is the best Verhoeven film we watched, and it is a great movie. I do love
I don't think
RoboCop.
so either, though, man. But when you talk about Raising Arizona, No Country for Old Men, and There Will Be Blood versus what we watched in season one, it's hard to figure out what the other two are. And the other two will be from season one, but it'll be two from season one. I can already tell. I mean, at least for me.
David Cronenberg, Fast Company, #1 forever, baby.
And Goodfellas.
And Goodfellas. No, I do. I think so. I did think about it, and at a glance, I don't want to get too deep into it because we'll talk about it next week. But I think my #1 is still Raising Arizona. Something about that movie just charms me to no end, and the writing is so fun, and the performances, everything. And this is obviously a different tone. It's a totally different kind of movie. But this is, I think this is the second best film that we've watched this season.
I will say for my rankings, almost, There Will Be Blood almost took over Raising Arizona. And if it would have done that, probably would have been my top pick for the whole entire season. It didn't, and not because I think it's a better movie than Raising Arizona as far as like when you talk about like from a technical aspect and all these other things. But Raising Arizona just hit such a sweet spot for me, and that I didn't know that I was looking for, that it's hard to topple that as my #1 film for season 2.
Yeah, they're different metrics. You almost kind of have to compare the films in terms of what they're going for.
Yeah.
I think. And yeah, I completely agree. And I will say too, there is maybe one. I don't think this movie, the pacing, I think is excellent especially for a 2.5-hour film. I think that the plot about the man claiming to be his brother is necessary for the family themes, the themes of family. I do think there are maybe some moments throughout that subplot that are maybe a little long, or maybe could have been reduced slightly. That's the only part. This is not a and this is an after the movies reference. So totally different film, but this is not the same case as Psycho Goreman, where we're like, this movie's cool, but also desperately needed an editor. This has an editor. This movie's great. It's near perfect. That's the only thing. It's not even a complaint. It's just one of those things where it's like, if I was going to cut anything, I would maybe cut a little bit of time there to tighten it up a little bit. But it is pretty much as tight as a 2.5-hour film can be.
I think this is the first film that we've talked about and discussed where I really don't have any gripes or hangups or something that I would change. I would be silly to sit here and who I am to be like, I would change this in such an iconic movie, probably one of the best movies I ever watched. So I'll let it be. I'm not touching it. I'm not touching this film at all. So
I agree. Man, I'm glad that we made it this far without it's like heaping praise on Daniel Day-Lewis, not because he doesn't deserve it, but just because that's obviously the highlight of this film and where a lot of the praise goes. But every aspect of this thing, I can't mention enough. This was I believe Greenwood's first collaboration with Paul Thomas Anderson, which was then carried further. He's done music for his film since. And I just think the music is a crucial component to it. There's scenes. There is at least one shot in particular that I remember that is action happening on the oil field with this track happening of like this. It sounds like people mining or people, this beating drum kind of thing. And it's like dread inducing, anxiety inducing. And I'm pretty sure it goes on for close to 3 minutes without any kind of dialogue or interruption. But it's not boring. I mean, it feels necessary to the film. And I just think all of it comes together. The writing, the directing. I think there was a vision here that was executed. Um, Daniel Day-Lewis does deserve all of the praise he gets because his performance is next level. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody that felt so believable as a person from this period.
I agree.
And then one interesting fact, I guess, to part on is that HW, the actor that plays HW, never returned to film after this.
Well, it's interesting that he wasn't an actor. His family never intended for him to be a child actor. He was a resident of the town that they were filming in, and they wanted him to be HW, but they tried to convince his mother. They were like, "Well, I want to know who Daniel Day-Lewis is before I let my son play." So they showed her a clip of him in Gangs in New York, and she,
like this lady that doesn't know who.
yeah,
this
which
actor
is
is. She's
interesting.
like, I need to know this Daniel Day-Lewis character you're talking
And
about.
she was like, absolutely not. And then they like, apparently from what I was reading, they rushed her a copy of Age of Innocence to get her to be like A-okay and then give the go ahead on him being there, which is funny story that you bring up.
The scene too, I don't want to, we're probably at time, but I do just want to say, like, trying to, I should keep a better track of my thoughts, but the scene where the Paul Dano stuff really came around and worked on me is when he berates Abel for letting this happen.
You're a stupid man, and God can't save you from being stupid.
And he lunges across the dinner table at him, and to see this young man be that threatening towards his family, towards his father, was, you start to see that this character is in some ways no different than Day-Lewis.
Yeah, not at all.
He has this, and that's the thing. He is a con man just as much as Daniel Day-Lewis is, and not a con man in the sense that, Daniel Day-Lewis is successful, so not a con man in the sense that he can't do the things he says, but a con man in the way that he treats people and the way that he portrays himself.
He's really conning himself, is what he's doing. He's a con man to himself, pretty much, I think. Like, he thinks that like he is doing God's work and God's mission, and he's just, but in reality, he's doing it for him. Like, he's doing it for him. Sure. He's not really doing it to help anyone else in the congregation. He's doing it for him. Like, he thinks that he is the prophet of God and conning everybody and that like kind of thing, and conning himself all in the same time.
Well, and his, look, I can't blame him for being bitter about what Daniel Plainview put him through, but as a man of God, his decision to humiliate Daniel Plainview in front of the congregation, and to have him say, "I abandoned my boy," is like, that is when like that this person, there's more to it than this person simply being a good man of the faith.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, we finally are able to do it. A shout out to our Patreon members. Jay Irvin, thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for being a LoMo VIP, being a part of the LoMo VIP tier. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to join Jay in our Patreon, go to patreon.com/LoMo Media. We have a $3, a $5, a $10, and a $15 tier. All of those tiers include joining us as we watch these movies and listen to us in real time, text back and forth about what we think and what our thoughts are. Jay, thank you so much.
Seems like a fitting time to cut this, I guess, if I'm wrong. We've been talking a lot about after the movies. We've recorded quite a few episodes of it, and we love doing it. We would do some really different movies than what we would do on this show, but it's fun because we get to catch kind of the popcorn type flicks, and we get to catch kind of this more academic discussion. And we've had so much fun doing it, and we think that people are enjoying it enough. We were talking about putting it behind the paywall, but we've made the decision for the meantime, in lieu of putting after the movies behind the paywall, we will be putting the video of our sister podcast, Shooting the Bit, behind the paywall.
Yep.
And what's great about this is that you can still listen to for free. Shooting the Bit will still be free. It will still be streaming wherever you stream your podcast. You can listen to the show. And if you love our beautiful mugs, then you can join us on Patreon, and you can pay $3 a month, and you can have access to those videos. We are gearing up to shoot a short film this summer, and we are in need of some equipment. So it helps us out, and it is less than a cup of coffee a month. After the movies is going to be free, and we're going to continue to do that show for free. Videos on YouTube as well as podcast streaming where you stream your podcasts. And hey, if you join the Patreon, that means that you get to watch these films in real time with us, both for at the movies and after the movies. Discuss the film with us as we're watching it. We'll sync up. Get to hear our thoughts before the episode comes out. So thank you so much, folks, for joining us at the movies. We got another episode of After the Movies coming out this week, and then next week you can look forward to No Country for Old Men. What after the movies is it? Psycho Goreman?
So Psycho Goreman this week, and Mandy the week after that, and No Country for Old Men for at the movies coming up soon. So
for this week, homework, if you want to join us for the show next week, watch Psycho Goreman streaming on Shudder and watch No Country for Old Men. I think you got to rent that one.
Yep.
But we will see you shortly. Thanks for joining us for At the Movies.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great one. See you next week.